On this episode of Locally Grown, join Robin and Christine at the Alice Austen house. For years, she captured the faces of New York City, documenting its residents, its history, and the changing world they lived in. The mark Alice Austen left on the world of photography is undeniable. She was independently wealthy for much of her life and was never paid for her work, which technically made her an amateur. But her legacy includes 7,000 photographs, each a window into the lives of New York's immigrant population or Victorian women's social activities and nature and beautiful architecture of her travels. Join Robin and Christine for a trip to the historical Alice Austen house. The structure was built in 1690 as a one-room Dutch farmhouse. Austen's grandfather, John Haggerty, purchased it in 1844, and it was a home that she shared with her partner, Gertrude Tate, for 3 decades. Robin and Christine meet with the executive director, Victoria Monroe, for an exclusive tour inside the house.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Locally Grown. And Christine and I are here with Victoria, who's going to take us around and show us some of Alice's collections. And I think everybody should be just excited as we are.
Get to see some of the history and some of the actual very cool things that this woman's done. So, Victoria, why don't you take us away and show us what...
Well, welcome everyone and welcome to the Alice Austen house.
Thank you.
As I said, my name's Victoria Monroe, the Executive Director of the Alice Austen house. I'm absolutely thrilled to show you all around today. I know you've had some fun filming in the park, which is just glorious. We're at this waterfront location. We're standing here today in a hallway that's part of the original Dutch 2-room farmhouse that was built in 1690. So this is one of New York's most historic houses, and we're one of 23 historic houses in New York City. And today I'm going to take you on a little tour just to introduce you to some of the elements in Alice Austen's life, work, and some of the collections that we have here at the house.
Awesome.
So why don't you come on through with me?
Sure.
As we pass into the parlor, we're going to pass by this very large, iconic photograph of Alice Austen. Now, she's around 22 years old in this picture. Austen was born in 1866 and received her first camera from her uncle Oswald at around about the age of 10.
Yes.
He actually took this photograph of her in 1888, and she's looking fiercely out at us. Austen must have been an incredibly strong woman, and we'll learn a little bit about more of that and her photography as we move through the museum.
With breathtaking views of Brooklyn, the Alice Austen house is the permanent home to her photographic legacy. In addition to the permanent exhibition, the museum curates 3 exhibitions a year exploring the intersections between Austen's work themes and contemporary art and photojournalism.
We have
Yes.
Alice's family tree. Now, when we hung this, we wanted to include all of the players that lived in this house. So Austen never took her father's name because her father abandoned her mother when she was teeny tiny. And so Alice and her mother moved back into this family home, the home that was purchased by Austen's grandparents in 1844. But yes, so they were this sort of eccentric, intelligent, upper middle class family. Money wasn't an issue. And so Alice is this small child being raised amongst all these adults. And I think that gives us a real window into who she was, because they doted on her. And I think they allowed her really to pursue things that weren't traditional for a Victorian young woman.
It probably is part of the reason why she became who she was, and her abilities to be herself and be as outspoken and as honest. She didn't live a fake lifestyle.
Austen also is an icon in the LGBTQ+ community, and her former home is a nationally designated site of LGBTQ+ history. But her story is a sad one. Austen and Tate spent 53 loving years together, but prejudice and family kept them mostly apart later in life.
She didn't live necessarily according to some of these strict social rules that were in place for Victorian women. So Alice was a champion tennis player, and tennis was played for the very first time in Staten Island. So Walker Park held the very first tennis tournament in the USA.
That's nice to know.
So, you know, pretty significant for Staten Island.
Sure.
And in its second, she once they integrated women's and women's doubles. She actually won the women's doubles integrated tournament. So Austen was well known for her sports prowess, which was really important in freeing women from the restrictive clothing of the Victorian era. She was also a huge advocate for bicycling for women and was one of the founding members of the Staten Island Bicycle Club. Now, the family absolutely adored this property and they called it Clear Comfort. Now, this home would also become one of Austen's photographic muses, and we also regard it as her studio because she maintained a darkroom on the second floor. Austen would develop and print all of her own work without running water or electricity. So it's really quite significant just how talented she was, the images she was able to capture with such rudimentary equipment, and the darkroom's just a closet.
Alice also took an extensive series of photographs, almost as a professional assignment, at the request of Dr. Dottie of the U.S. Public Health Service, a local quarantine station in the early 1890s. During this time, 500,000 immigrants a year were sailing into New York. As the greatest mass immigration in human history got underway, the immigrants were admitted through the newly built federal station on Ellis Island. But before they were allowed to enter the harbor, all ships had to pause for inspection at the quarantine station just south of the Austen house.
We have a small sample of Austen's quarantine photography. I think that this is a really, really important collection. So she has hundreds of photographs of the quarantine stations on Hoffman and Swinburne Islands. A lot of people only learn about Ellis Island, but the two man-made islands that we can see from South Beach held two large quarantine stations. So it was a new technology. They were only just forming a sanitation department. So Austen would photograph all of this new disinfecting equipment, and her photographs actually were shown at the Buffalo's World's Fair in 1891. So it's really about rewriting the truthful history of Austen. It's often been talked about that she was a hobbyist, or they'd like to use the word amateur, which had a very different, more serious interpretation in Austen's time. But I say that she was really a professional.
Yeah, she's not an amateur. Absolutely not. But possibly it wasn't recognized until after her
For lots of reasons.
passing, sure.
One of which just being the mere fact that she was a woman, right?
Right.
But she's actually one of America's first women to work outside of the studio.
It's safe to say Alice Austen was not your average Victorian woman. It was common at the time that women had to be chaperoned by men during most activities. Monroe explains how she overcame this, creating the freedom she and all other women deserved.
She made these spaces, safe spaces for her and her female friends to be, and they were spaces where you didn't have to be chaperoned by a man. And so that's kind of key, because so many activities for young Victorian women, you had to have a male chaperone with you. However, bicycling, it was okay for two women to go out bicycling together, or even alone. And the garden was another one of these spaces. She also had a cooking club and who knows what else, but I think, she was very inventive.
I was going to say that's so telling in the fact that she was basically, we don't need men in our lives, so let's do those things that we enjoy, that we can do without men being involved?
Well, there's definitely that. I mean, certainly Alice had a lot of male friends too. And they feature in this wonderful letter collection that we have here in the Alice Austen house.
Which kind of paved the way for people like us to do things that we wanted to do. I mean, you're in banking, that's not traditionally a woman's place in the world, and I'm in real estate, we also know same thing.
Right.
So, like, she was part of the reason why we can do what we do.
Exactly. And I also get to run a museum, which is really fabulous. You know?
Exactly. So we all get to do what we love. Exactly.
We get to do powerful things and
Sure.
powerful things for the community. And so these are examples that we can show young students that really are inspirational. And there's a lot of inspiration taken from the creative processes of photography as well.
Sure.
And that's important, you bring up the students, it's important for them to see this, because I think, listen, I was a kid too, life started
No.
as a kid, nobody else. I know it was only last year. But life only started then, you didn't even believe your parents were. But to come in and see that, wow, all right, here is a woman who fought everything but was herself. Maybe giving them some comfort, and they can be themselves and they can do whatever they want to do and achieve what they want to do.
Austen lost her wealth in the 1929 stock market crash, and the couple were evicted from their beloved home in 1945. With nowhere to turn, they sought help from family, but they were rejected. Austen was taken to live at the Staten Island farm colony, where Tate would visit every week. In 1951, money raised through the sale of her photographs helped place Austen in a private nursing home, but the damage had been done. The couple had requested that they be buried together. It was a request that would be denied by their families.
And finally, we kind of round off the storytelling in this room, really paying tribute to, as I mentioned before, the 56-year relationship of Austen and Gertrude Tate, because she's a very important protagonist in this story. And so, we celebrate their life and love here in many different ways, but it's also a part of a story that's quite difficult and resonates with people today.
And very sad, actually.
Yes, because they lost this house in 1945. They initially tried to take a small apartment together, but struggled to be able to finance that, and both of them were elderly by that stage, particularly Austen. And so eventually they couldn't maintain that, and Gertrude Tate's family said, yes, you can come back and live with us, Gertrude, but we're not going to take Alice because we believe it's the wrong kind of devotion.
Sure.
So they were denied ending their life, their last days together, and Austen would end up in the Staten Island poorhouse after signing a note saying she only had $20 to her name. Thankfully, she was discovered by a man named Oliver Jensen, who was writing a book called The Revolt of the American Woman. He discovered her photographs. He said to the board at Richmond Town, imagine if she was still alive.
And they said she is.
And so he was able to sell some of her photographs to magazines, raise enough money to put her in a proper nursing home, and she passed the following year.
Aww.
But that really set the ball rolling for this community to come back to acknowledge Austen, recognize her contributions through seeing her images in print. And that's the kind of community swell that we still try to maintain here today. We teach over 4,000 students a year in K through 12 programs. We teach university students, we have interns, and we have over 20,000 visitors per year to our park and museum. So throughout the summer months, we have stages and performances and theatre, poetry, dance, music. So we're really about all of the arts, but the museum itself is very focused on photography. And so we also maintain 2 contemporary photographic galleries. So we provide a platform for contemporary photography. And every 3 years we host a triennial of Staten Island photography, really surveying the state of photography in Staten Island today.
So I will say I'm really thrilled that we came in here, because when we saw the outside, which is spectacular, to come inside and really discuss the history and learn about Alice truly from an expert. And I feel that this is a place that's a must for every Staten Islander and for every non-Staten Islander. Because it's not just beautiful, it's powerful. The story is extremely sad, but wonderful, all at the same time. And her art really shows who she was as a strong woman.
I think my takeaway today is, we always find ourselves focusing on who we are and the people around us. She didn't do that. She was open to everybody and photographed everybody and showed all different types of people. And I think that that's something that today is so important, just to see even what this woman faced, and she still was open to all different types of people.
So thank you so much. It was so nice speaking to you.
Yes.
And thank you everybody for tuning in for this episode of Locally Grown. I'm Robin Lefkowitz from Northfield Bank.
And I'm Christine Dehart from Salmon Real Estate.
Thank you. Oh, and Victoria.
Victoria Munro from the
Yes.
Austen house.
So sorry. Yes. Thank you.